What's up, world? It's Ryan Banta again, coming at you. Sorry, it's been a couple days since I've gotten to log in and chat a little bit, working on finalizing my master's degree. Yes. And doing the last couple projects for that. Additionally, working on, getting the house prepared to move. So if any of you guys are looking for a new house in the Missouri area, you can hit me up. I got a nice house for you to purchase. But anyway, we're looking to move closer to Parkway Central, which is where I coach and teach at. But anyway, so a lot of discussion has been going on back and forth about like 16 times 110 conditioning test and old school methods and feed the cats versus long to short, or Clyde Hart and his methods and what he did. And I think it's really important to have some perspective, and specifically perspective on training methods and what's considered old school. Now, the reality is, what is old school? Is it the 1970s? Is it the 1980s? Is it the 1990s? Is it 2000? Old school is a constantly shifting idea. It's constantly moving forward, along with all these people who think they're in the new school. And if you're in education or in coaching for a long enough of a period of time, one of the things you're going to find out is stuff that seemed to be inventive and brand new and genius in the past comes back again and becomes presented as genius, brand new, and innovating. I have been teaching. This will be my 15th year teaching and my 18th year in education and my 19th season coaching. And so in my time involved in education, or as a real teacher or as a coach, we've gotten along far enough now to where who I started coaching when they were 18 years old, the kids that would be there 18 years later weren't born yet. And they're adults and they've graduated high school, and have gone on to college. And so when we look at this situation, it's like, that seems like to some of you who are brand new or just out of school or gotten your job as a graduate assistant, you think that's a long time ago. But as you get older, you start to see patterns, and time begins to speed up in terms of chronological time. But what the time passes and these things that connect and the things that have changed, you start to see those things circle back. I remember when I first started teaching, we were presented with a principle called essential questioning. And essential questions are the key ideas that you want your classroom to learn when you're teaching, and they're all driven by an essential question. Well, that can be applied to coaching as well. And I actually like that. It's like, what's the big idea? What's the main thing that we want you to get out of this particular lesson or this particular unit of training or this practice? What are we trying to accomplish? Everything should be driven by that question. Then when we go along here for well over a decade, now almost 2 decades I've been coaching, you start to see that stuff recycled. So now it's like the inquisitive questioning, which is like, by the way, the same thing, just said twice. But it's the same idea. And it's like, oh, they're presenting it as this new thing. It's like, no, that's essential questioning. They're like, oh, no, the verbiage is different. So I can sell a book, or I can write a program, and I can make money, and I can say that I've invented something brand new. I've repackaged it. Now, it's important for you guys to understand that that's what I did. The Sprinter's Compendium, I have my own ideas, I have my own training, I have my own thoughts, but all of that's come from someone, and it has roots that are decades earlier than me, and maybe decades earlier than I even existed. I'm 41 years old now, and some of the stuff that I do is based off the knowledge and advice and training of people who were coaching in the 70s. And you go, oh, well, that's old school. Their methods are wrong. They didn't know what they were doing. And there are some truths to that. But yet, in that period of time, in the 1970s, 1980s, and of course 1990s, there were coaches who had, over a long period of time, extended success. So specifically, Clyde Hart, Coach Hart, the Baylor Bears. There's a lot of people that have poo-pooed the old school in his training. So the first question I have, the first thought of the day when I talk about old school is, well, were you there? A lot of people say, well, he did this, he does that, he did this, he did these things with the kids. Okay, how do you know? Well, he wrote it down on paper. Okay, did you see it executed? Do you know how it was executed? I can write a workout and say 2 times 450 and 4 times 200, which, by the way, is the key quintessential long to short workout that people usually do, okay, to train for 400-meter runners. But that can be done a whole lot of ways. What's the intensity? How fast were you going? How old are your athletes? How much rest did you put in between? How many groups did you run? Did you go one at a time? Did you combine groups? What was the rest in between the 200s? What were the intensities of the 200s? Did you count that as 4 reps or 2 reps and then another 2 reps later? You know, how long have the athletes been doing that workout? What were the workouts before they did that? And what are the workouts you do the next day? And if you don't ask those questions, if you don't know the answer to those questions, then you don't really know what took place. And it's very difficult for you to judge the old school. Think about it. When we talk about training, we talk about elite people, we talk about elite history. Most of the people involved, most of the coaches, the athletes, the support staff, all those people, you're only learning about the tippy top people. We're talking about the less than 1% of 1% people, coaches, athletes, and that. And so because we didn't have, digital recording everywhere and everybody was posting all their Instagram workouts and, hashtag bless butt shots and Bible verses, we don't really know what people were doing. And even in that situation, you don't really know what those people are doing. You're getting a snippet of the things that they're doing and you have no idea, and there's a lot of ways to manipulate stuff. So what is truth? Well, truth is settled in the time period of the people who were exactly there and watched it. And even their truth's a little false because they're biased on their own perspective. Because as you and I know, perception is about 90% of reality. So however a person perceives you, or the program or what's going on will drive their narrative and their history and their story for them. So if you're not there, you really have to be careful in how you judge it. You have to be very careful. You have to be careful of what happens. So what's one of the best ways to figure things out? Well, one of the best ways to figure things out is before we make a judgment, were they successful, and were they successful over a long period of time? Clyde Hart was successful for a long period of time. The dude just retired this year and has had multiple All-American relays in the 4x4 and in the 400. And when you say, well, he just has extreme talent and that's why he's good. Maybe some of those guys were really good and had the necessary materials and he made them even better. I oftentimes hear that people say, well, it's either freaks or cheats. That quote was recently presented when discussing a particular athlete. That's just as dismissive and absolutist as people who defend the long to short and Clyde Hart method. You have to be very careful when you say that, because the reality is the more you work, the more people can adaptate. They may not adaptate in the right way, but they can make adaptations. So logically, the more you're working on a particular thing, the better you might get at that particular thing. And if somebody's having extended success over a long period of time, obviously something's going on there, because that doesn't happen without built-in structures socially, support staff, training-wise, the X's and O's over that period of time, because somebody's going to beat you. Somebody's going to dominate you for a long time. Now, you might also say, well, recently the success hasn't been as good. Well, we all have our peak time as a coach, and then we have kind of our twilight years. Not to say that, Coach Hart doesn't know what he's doing or he's different. But, as you get older, you lose the ability to reach certain athletes and certain people. There's a period of time where you have kind of your pinnacle, your peak as a coach, where everything's going the right way and you're all in and you got all this kind of stuff going on. And then as you get older, things kind of happen. You have kids, you have family. You're too old to keep moving around. Coach Path's been all over the place, all over the world, and eventually Coach Path is like, I'm not moving all over the world anymore. I'm going to stay in one spot. And I think he deserved it. Now, is that to say that Coach Path isn't as good of a coach as he used to be because he's not working with all the athletes because he can't go chase the talent? No, now the talent comes to him, because it changes. But that also means that the number of athletes you're going to work with is probably going to be a lot smaller. Why? Because as a coach, you're probably going to be more selective in who you choose to spend your time with, because as you get older, time becomes very precious. It's the only thing you can't get back. It's the only thing that really, really matters is your time and who you spend it with. So be very careful when you think about what you're judging and how you're judging them. So are they successful over a long period of time? Coach Path, successful with a lot of different groups of people, a lot of different athletes over a long period of time. The guy's a master. Tom Tellez, a lot of people over a long period of time, very successful, still helps out and is still a mentor to many people. Clyde Hart, successful over a long period of time, and the coaches who have chosen to use his system have been very successful in a specific way. Long period of time, extended success, those are the people that you want to probably investigate. Then once you kind of investigate their methods and training, then you got to do your best to figure out how you can be mentored by them and ask questions as opposed to dismiss them. As a coach, when I first started out, I was very dismissive of a coach named Coach Carey, who was in our area, and he and I have had many conversations about this, so we know this, so it's not going to offend him. But I used to get really mad at his success, and I thought he was doing everything wrong, and his methods were crazy, and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized he kept winning, and he kept kicking my butt, and I realized it had more to do about what he was doing and not, anything else. There were none of this other stuff. It's like, well, what's he doing? And then I realized it's not about what he's doing. It's more about what I'm doing and how can I manage my program? How can I create a culture of success? What can I do to build a program in my school? And, sure enough, over time, I began to build a relationship with him as opposed to resisting him and dismissing him. I built a relationship with him to figure out, well, how did you do these things over time? What did you do? And he is the greatest guy in the world, and he's super willing to share. And because of my relationship with him, my program as a whole and how it functions has improved because of my relationship with him. So instead of dismissing, ask questions, be inquisitive, figure it out. So the other thing, though, is you got to figure out if things pass the smell test. Some people are successful for a really long time because they do cheat or they are working with freaks. A lot of times that's kind of a club system, where the club coaches go, well, we're really good. Look at how great these athletes are. Look at what we've been able to accomplish over a long period of time. Yeah, maybe. So how do we know that the club coach passes the smell test? Do the athletes get better either when they're training with them or the following season? That's the best way to figure out if it passes the smell test. Then figure out, do they PR in the season that coach has them? Or does the coach who has them in high school is the one who always gets them to PR and they're healthy and they run? Are the athletes getting better all the years that they work in that club program? I remember there's an athlete, she's world class, she's a sprinter. She's going to be competing in the United States trials this coming weekend, or the weekend after next in Drake. And when she was in high school, she ran the exact same time, 24 seconds every year. And the club goes, oh, look how good we are. Look at our great program. Look at how great this athlete is. And when she left and ran in a collegiate system, and not at a cool school that's necessarily like known to being the best college program in the United States, she dropped 2.5 seconds, or excuse me, 1.5 seconds off of her 200 and became world class. That's pretty rare for somebody who's ran that much and trained that much. So then I would beg the question, does that coach who is working with that athlete over a long period of time, do they pass the test? Well, then if you're going to be real judgmental about that and say, well, yeah, they didn't know what they were doing, the next question you have to ask is, well, maybe that was just that particular athlete. What are all the other athletes who have worked with that particular coach done? Oh, well, they've all improved. Okay. Well, the coach knows what they're doing. Maybe their methods are great. Now, what does that have to do with old school or new school? Well, constantly everybody's trying to sell you a newfangled idea or something. Hey, come work with me, or this is the way to roam. This is the best way to get things done. This is the best way to maximize your athletes. But the reality is that the athlete is the one who decides what you do. And not because, hey, coach, I ain't running the 400. I'm not running the 4x4. Oh, you're not going to move me up to the 800. I'm not going to hurdle. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the talents and the abilities of the athlete will dictate how you train them and what you do. So over time, the coaches who pass the smell test are the coaches who don't necessarily just do one thing. They do multiple things with different athletes depending on the athlete's abilities and the athlete's needs. And also, those coaches are not the ones who overwhelmingly take credit for the ability of their athletes. Now, I know all of us want to be confident. We want to sometimes have those conversations with our athletes and say, my way is the right way. I promise you, trust me, follow me, respect me, believe in what we're doing. We've all been there. We've all had those conversations, and I've had those conversations as well. But the reality is that you've got to be open-minded to, well, why is this coach doing what they're doing, and why have they had success over a long period of time? Maybe I should ask about that, even though maybe the USATF manual tells me that that's not the right way to do it, or Coach Banta told me in the book it's not the right way to do it, or maybe a guy on a video one time at a conference said this is what you should do. But you should ask questions, because there might be a reason why that person's having success, and their system or their environment has driven them to choose to do that old school training. Also, fourth thing, having an open mind and these questions that we're talking about in these situations, were you there? Are they successful over a long period of time? Does the training pass the smell test? That also can be used in reverse. When people provide you a new school method, okay, that sounds too good to be true. Maybe it is. Or maybe they really have figured something out. Or maybe it's really good, but only in a specific way. Like, hey, this is the new thing. It really works. It's great. Yeah, but it works here. But it might not work all the way over here. Or it might not work with a kid who I'm trying to do this. As you guys know, through my evolution as a coach, I had a funnel system. And not like I'm shoving all the kids down there, but I had a system that I ran all my kids through early on. The older I've gotten and the more experience that I've gained and small pieces of wisdom that I might have acquired over time has led me to understand that, okay, this kid needs to go over here. This kid needs to do these series of events. We need to think longer term view. So maybe in a single season isn't what we're looking at. We're looking at actually 3 seasons of training. So we're going to sacrifice something this season to create something for next season. And that's pretty scary. You got to be pretty confident in what you're doing, right? But those ideas that may seem new, do they pass the smell test? Okay, I don't know. All right, well, then you might not want to implement that thing right away. You might not want to jump in all right away. And everybody else around you saying, this is what you got to do. You don't know what you're doing. You're just an old fogey. You've got this old school method. Well, maybe let's see the fruits of this. Over a long period of time, how does this change things? And yeah, maybe I might lose out on an athlete being better in a particular event because I chose not to pick up on that training right away. But also, you as a coach, not only does it pass the smell test, you got to figure out how to do it. It's like watching a YouTube video on how to do something, right? You got to do it eventually. And the first time you do it, you're probably going to mess something up. It's probably going to be something. The first time your dad says, hey, this is how you fix a small motor on a power washer. You're like, yeah, okay. And then eventually you're going to have to go do it. And the first time you do it, you might mess it up. And now all of a sudden you got freaking water spraying out of the back of the power washer. And you just got this dinky little hose shooting on your wall that you're trying to clean off. These are things that are tough that you're going to have to learn. And unfortunately, we're not talking about a piece of machinery. We're talking about an athlete. So you probably want to research. You probably want to ask a lot of questions. You probably want to sit back and observe and maybe learn vicariously before you decide to implement something. And most importantly, when you decide to implement something, make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when you do it. Don't go entirely in. Experiment with a group of athletes or a particular set of drills or workouts that you feel like you can trust, and it has not the biggest bang for the buck. It's not the highest risk and highest reward. It's smaller. And then as you get more confident, you can implement that system maybe more to its fullest or be more aggressive with it or even take it farther than some other people might have taken it. Some of the methods that I learned from Coach Burris on kind of what we call the critical mass system, which is where you're training. And I got another video on that you guys can look up on my YouTube that's much more detailed about the critical mass system. But eventually we kind of figured out where these athletes needed to be. And instead of just applying the critical mass methods to just a 200, 400 meter runner, I eventually moved that up to apply that to the 800 meter runners. So when I'm bringing a kid down to the 800 or 400 and I'm moving them up to the 800, I want them to be prepared properly for that particular event. And because of that critical mass system, we now have a system that led to a state record in the 4x8 and multiple all-state girls in the 800. Now, you may go back and look at my last 2 seasons and go, well, you haven't had a really good 800 runner individually in the last 2 years. I know. But for about 8 to 9 years, we had a chain of very good 800 meter runners that kept getting better and better and better and better. And some of them were frustrated sprinters. Some of them were distance runners that we moved down. So then over the long-term event, do I and my training methods pass the smell test? I believe they do because I've had a decade of really fast kids in that particular event. So I trust that works. But what doesn't work? The athletes that I have aren't the athletes that do that event. So do I do that event? No. We had a young lady who was on our 4x8. We couldn't train her for the 4x8 because, sure enough, showed up. She's a great long jumper. An 800 kid that turned out to be a really good long jumper. So guess what? Next year, she's not going to be running the 800 as much because she can't. because we got to put her in the long jump because she's really good and probably will be all state qualifier. I don't want to put a lot on her, but she's got a lot of potential. And so imagine all that time that we spent running those longer intervals and will now be spent on doing more plyometrics that are geared towards, maximum power output for long jump. She's probably going to be a lot better, and she's going to get to spend more time doing it. And now she knows the event, so she comes back a little more confident, a little bit more prepared, and so now the performances begin to stabilize. You're not having just 3 meets that are really good. You have this chain of events where we just had a girl break our school record in the long jump, and I think that this kid might have a chance to break that record. So that's kind of cool, right? So those are the types of things as coaches you got to do to figure out and be open-minded and put that test to everybody else. So really important to think about. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you letting me rant today, this afternoon, about respecting the old school and thinking about it a little bit differently than just being dismissive and critical and throwing it away as old and unuseful. You know what? Sometimes, training and old school training can be like that old piece of furniture you have in the basement, that used to be the dining room table that was beautiful and the gathering place where everyone would meet and tell their great stories. And then eventually, for some reason, you traded it in for a new fangled IKEA table, and you realize maybe that IKEA table wasn't as good as the other one. So you take it back, you strip it down, you revarnish it, you clean it up, you take the dust off, find some brand new chairs to put around that table, and all of a sudden that old school table looks like something brand new and modern again because it swung back that way. Thanks, guys. Peace out. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're seeing this on YouTube. Please put comments down there and suggest ideas for videos or discussion points. Let me know, and feel free to share this anywhere and to whoever you think it might help that needs it. All right, guys. Love you. I'm out.